Hey there, Christian Walsh, Coldwell Banker Wire Associates here with another big update. 1 month later on April 28th, we are now here to talk about not being able to pay rent for May. So this is going to be a big issue. Probably more folks going through this month than we had last month. A lot of people have used savings to pay for last month's rent, maybe security deposit, things like that. Well, now we're coming into May and those options are no longer on the table. So this is a guide for landlords and tenants. Please tune in and let's all work together to come up with a mutually beneficial way to get through the month. But first, let's talk about where we were a month ago and where we are now. What is new? So executive order, there was an executive order from Newsom on March 27th, 2020 that put a moratorium on evictions. We actually did a video about that. But that was further expanded in April, and we did a video on that, by the Judicial Council. So on April 6th, the Judicial Council essentially stopped most evictions from happening other than health or safety. And the moratorium is 90 days after the end of the emergency is declared, where all unlawful detainers can move forward. We don't know when this is going to end, so we're still 90 days from an unknown date. So evictions aren't happening. The other thing the judicial order did was expand it from just residential, so that's houses, condos, multifamily. It expanded it to commercial. So no evictions really going on right now. So the other big thing, the other big update we were all hoping to have something new on was all the coronavirus stimulus that the federal government was pumping into the economy. And that unfortunately just hasn't shaken out the way we all thought it would. Not blaming anybody, not casting any aspersions, but just now people are getting their $1,200 stimulus checks. Those were being direct deposited. Some are still are weeks away from being mailed out. So unfortunately, those funds, which some people were hoping to use for rent, just aren't there yet. Now, if you have tenants who are self-employed, gig workers, small business owners, there was some great stuff put into play that hasn't shaken out either. So there are a couple of loan programs, the PPP, the EIDL, and I personally don't know anybody who's received any of those funds. I know a lot of people are working very hard to help make those funds come through, but they just haven't hit yet. And same thing for those folks, the unemployed, gig workers, small business owners, and self-employed. One of the things in the bill was the pandemic unemployment assistance, which is absolutely brand new. It was unemployment insurance or unemployment assistance for those folks. And just today, California's EDD is now accepting applications for that. So they worked very hard to get us to this point, but nobody's received those funds either. So it's kind of a long story I'm explaining, but we're all in the same boat. And there's another important point to remember, that just as people have lost income in their jobs due to COVID-19, for landlords, the lost rent is lost income. So we really are pushing compassion from both sides on this. But let's go through some options so everybody can compassionately work together. So we're coming up on the first. Let's say a tenant can't pay. What are the options? So one option, and it's rare and it's a lot to ask, and we don't expect landlords to do this, but one option is to actually waive the rent. We did see this happen in some places in April. I find it hard to believe May, June, and going forward that landlords are going to be able to afford to do that. But if the rent is waived, that won't need to be paid back. Again, don't expect this from a landlord. It's a lot to ask, but some of my clients have done that. So number two would be a full forbearance. So that's where the tenant can't pay any rent, so the landlord is going to go ahead and move it to a time in the future. We'll discuss that coming up. But a full forbearance, the tenant can't pay any rent. You're not off the hook, tenant, you still owe the rent, okay? But we're going to push it to the future. Next thing would be a partial payment. So the partial payment, maybe the resident comes up with half the rent and the rest gets pushed off into the future, which again, we'll come up with plans. The fourth thing that can be done is use the security deposit. So whether the security deposit is used to cover all the month's rent or if it's used for a portion of the month's rent, that is another route to go. Of course, the security deposit That rent would no longer be due in the future, but a landlord could require that you replenish those funds. A landlord can ask a tenant to replenish security deposit funds in the future. So those are the ways to get through the coming month here. Those are the different approaches. So here's what you need to do. You need to document everything. So we have a form you can ask for that will help you document the amount of rent that's not being paid. But here's the next important thing, the repayment schedule. That needs to be documented. And let's come up with something that makes sense. It doesn't make sense to ask for July, ask for a big pile of rent. Nobody's going to have the money by then to pay all the back rent. Let's come up with a reasonable, mutually beneficial schedule that will allow the rent to be repaid. So maybe you start in July or August and you tack on, and you do it over 6 months or 9 months. You tack on the amount of rent when divided out that's equivalent to. Now, the other thing is landlords and tenants work together now because we may be in this same boat in another 30 or 60 days. If the economy hasn't kicked up and started and we're not out there able to work, we're not going to have the money to pay the rent coming due in the months ahead. So be ready to renegotiate and renegotiate those payment plans. Again, this is a time for compassion. Nobody knew we'd be here today. Nobody knew 30 days ago, and nobody really knew 60 or 90 days ago. But so far, I've seen a lot of stuff that gives me hope, and I've seen a lot of positivity out there from the tenant side and the landlord side. So let's continue to work together. And I know this sounds kumbaya, but please, let's continue to work together. And if you need any help or ideas or just want to bounce things off me, feel free to reach out. Give me a call or text, 949-677-3466. The whole team is here to help you guys during this tough time. So please feel free to reach out, and we'll see if we can come up with a solution that'll work. And I know 6 months, 9 months from now, we're all going to be in a much better place. So let's work hard to get there. All right? Thanks for tuning in. Bye-bye.